Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be looking at my favourite technique with stencils, which is ghosting with them. So in a page in my journal, I've got this sort of bluey background that I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do with. So it's sort of continued on background from the page below, on the right. I can't speak today, on the right hand side. So just to break up the blue and just to make it a little bit different from that other page, I'm just tearing up some of the new alphabet tissue paper and gluing it in place with my gel medium. And this just gives a little bit of contrast. The white of the paper sort of melts into the background, so you've got, you know, something interesting happening in the background. Once I've dried off that layer, I'm then going over the top with a contrasting blue, so I've got this turquoise. It's not particularly thick, but I have spread it out over the entire page, and now I'm going to put down my stencil. So this one's called Sideways, and I'm just rubbing through with a damp wet wipe. So you don't want a really juicy one, you want it damp. Sometimes they're a little bit too juicy, and it's a good idea to put them on into a paper towel or something and just squeeze away some of the dampness. You can see this one is a brilliant repeating pattern because I was able to line it up exactly to just rub out that little bit at the bottom. And if you've got a wet wipe that is damp enough, you should be able to remove that paint really easily. Now this is something you do need to do fairly quickly because obviously acrylic paint does dry quickly, and you need to do this while it's still damp. Once acrylic paint dries, it's permanent, so you need to remove it before it dries. Sometimes if it's starting to dry and you give it a bit of a harder scrub, it will come off, but just be aware. So you do need to move fairly quickly and have a pretty good idea of what stencil you're using and so on. You don't have time to go and look for one. Just to help outline the stencil a little bit, I'm just going through with my white pen and just sort of doing a bit of a highlight drop shadow on it. And I actually really liked the effect. It sort of gave it a really 3D effect. I was toying up with getting a black pen and doing the opposite on the other side to give that a really 3D depth to it, or put a Stabilo oil pencil and a shadow through it. So it's something you could certainly play with this technique because it sort of gives you that peek through effect that you can use. I decided on this page I wanted to use some of the beautiful face transparencies from Dina Wakley. So this is from the Faces set, I think from Faces 2, I can't remember. Just sort of fussy cutting them roughly to size. With these connected ones, I'm just sort of cutting them out in a bunch, and I'm going to overlap them. Now one of the things I found with transparencies, which I'm really surprised with because I didn't think this would work, is I was always a bit hesitant to use transparencies as I thought you'd really see the glue underneath, but in actual fact you don't. It does dry clear, and you can actually overlap 2 or 3 transparencies on top of each other, and you won't see them. I do like adding a little bit of detail onto my transparencies, particularly again in the eyes. It's just something I like to do. It helps make them stand out a little bit on the page. And also if there's some shadowing like there is here, just putting a little bit of white contrast on it so you can sort of see where that is. It's a bit hard with the shine from the light, but it does help it pop out from the background somewhat. So using your paint pen, it doesn't really matter which side you use it on. I'm using it on the back side of my transparency just so it won't chip off, but I've done it on the front as well when I've forgotten, and both sides work equally well, so it's really handy. The other thing that you can do with these, obviously if you just don't want the black and white, you can paint on them. You can use paint pens, you can use your acrylic paint, you can go nuts with them. So don't be afraid to customize them to what you need them to be. But I wanted my focus, I suppose, to be on the background for this. So I've just put on some glue. I was a little bit more heavy-handed with my glue than I usually am. So you can see it sort of spreading out everywhere. It did take a day or 2 to dry completely, so it went see-through or clear again. But it did go clear, so I don't need to worry about sort of that unsightly white blob in the end. You can see in the end result how it went clear. I'm just going through and trimming up the excess transparency, and making it. So while I liked what I had on there, it needed something else just to finish it off. It's still quite unfinished. So I thought, as with most of my pages, I wanted to put a quote on it. And for this one, I sort of went back to an old card making trick of actually stamping it onto the white cardboard and making sort of a flag, bannery type effect for it. So going in with my ruler and just trimming it down to size. I do need to change my blade on my knife because it's completely dull at this stage. And then just going in and sort of freehanding a little flag bannery end to it. And then I will cut it to size and chuck it in my book. But the first thing I was going to do is to edge it slightly. So you can see there I can sort of fit it in. If it was a card or something like that, I would have stapled that onto the page, but because it was right in the center of my journal, that was never going to happen. So I'm just going to use a little bit of glue to glue it down. So just with my ink pad, I went round and sort of made a shadowy border to it. You could obviously use a Stabilo or pencil or a hand draw border on it, but I just like that sort of fuzzy edge to it. I also decided I wanted to frame up the page a little bit, so I just got some night paint and just sort of dragged my finger around it, which kind of worked. I think if I'd used a paintbrush on it, I would have got the paint too liney. Off screen, I just decided to blend it in a little bit more, so I got my black text stamp and just stamped over where I put that darker paint, just to sort of help blend it into the page a little bit more and play on that text in the background as well. So I hope you have a go at ghosting. It is a really, really handy technique to use when you're using stencils. It takes a little bit of practice. It is very easy, but just finding the wetness of the wet wipe is the trickiest bit. Have lots of fun. Until next time, bye for now.